Structured data markup is a form of coding embedded into HTML that can be used to tell search engines what particular components on a web page actually are. HTML essentially tells a web browser how to display a web page, the typeface and font size to be used, the text treatment, bold, italic, underline, and so on, where to place images, how much space to leave around things. It tells browsers what to do with the content on the page, but not what the content actually is.
Structured data markup, though, tells search engines what the content is. For example, look at this Google search result. Notice the extra line above the snippet with the stars and a rating? This is known as a rich snippet, a search result snippet that has additional extended information. You've probably seen these things spread around here and there in the search results. Where do these come from? How does Google retrieve this data and know it's a review? How about this from Bing? How does Bing retrieve this recipe information at the top of the results page? Well, let's take a look at the source code from one of those restaurant listings. Here's the page the listing points to. And here's the underlying source code for this listing. Notice that I have the word item highlighted in yellow. These item scope, item prop, and item type entries are the structured data markup. This form is what's known as microdata. I'll discuss the different forms of markup in the next lesson. Let's look at a few of these things. Item scope in effect introduces the information. It simply says that the code is going to include microdata. Item type describes what kind of data and points to the web page on schema.org that provides the details. In this case, it's data about a local business, of course. This is the schema.org page where the local business item type is fully described. We'll be looking at schema.org later. Okay, back to the code. This piece of code is the name of the local business, in this case, Famous Pizza. This piece of text, Famous Pizza, actually appears in the web page. The visitor sees this text. The tags around the text are used to format the text, and the item prop attribute is telling the search engines what the text is, that it's a name. We have more properties in this code. You can see a telephone number, and then we have another item scope and item type introducing another form of data, a postal address. And within that data type, we have a street address, address locality, the city, an address region, the state, and a postal code, the zip code. So where does the review information we saw in the search results come from? Well, lower down on the page we see this code. This item type is an aggregate rating, which is described on the reference page as the average rating based on multiple ratings or reviews. We also see a rating value of 100 and a rating count, which is the number of people who've rated the business. Remember, this listing in the search results showed a 100% score from 5 votes, 5 people.
So this is a simple illustration of how some basic coding can pass information on to the search engines. Anyone capable of working with HTML should be able to insert microdata code. It's pretty easy stuff. However, there are tools to help you, which we'll look at in a later lesson.
Both Google and Bing read structured data markup and use it in various ways for a range of different types of information. Each one uses it for different things with much overlap, of course, and the list will probably grow, so you'll want to see the Google and Bing information related to what they use and how they use it. These URLs will take you to the Google and Bing structured data markup pages where you can find more information. Remember, if you find broken links in any of these lessons, please do let me know and I'll fix them. Google uses this stuff to create the sort of rich snippets we saw earlier, but it also allows you to submit data to knowledge graphs. You can tell Google where to find a company logo, for instance, and provide telephone numbers. We'll look at this in a later lesson. It also allows you to create actions in the search results, perhaps enabling you to stream music or video from within the search results. And Google also collects reviews, such as movie and event reviews, and bundles them together in the search results. So many sites could be using structured data markup. If you have an e-commerce site, you'll want to tag your products. If you have a site that contains any kind of reviews or events, they should be tagged. Software publishers need to use structured data markup. Any site that contains articles should be using it. And in fact, it's a good idea to tag navigation breadcrumbs, as both Google and Bing say they read them. Does structured data markup help with your search results rankings? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Clearly, it must help with recipes in Bing. After all, if you don't use it, you can't end up here in the recipe bar at the top. In other cases, it's unclear whether the markup helps push sites up in the results. In the restaurant reviews, it's quite likely that it doesn't. But those stars help the items stand out in the results, so they may increase click-through from the results page.
So now that you know the basic idea behind structured data markup, you need to understand that there are different ways to do it. We looked at the microdata format, but there are others. So move on to the next lesson to learn about your options. You've seen why you should use structured data markup. Now you need to know how. In fact, there are several different ways you can code your pages, so you'll need to pick the right method for the right purpose.
There are really two different things you need to be aware of. The structured data markup vocabulary and properties, and the coding methods into which you'll embed these properties. So we'll begin at schema.org, where you can find all the properties used for various different purposes. The schema.org vocabulary comprises a hierarchy of hundreds of different types or classes, each one designed for a different type of data. Not just objects like products, businesses, books, articles, and so on, but even for actions such as creating things, creating movies, creating photographs, creating drawings, and for moving, arriving, leaving, traveling. Of course, we don't really care about most of these from an SEO perspective. All we care about are the things that the search engines care about, products, events, music, and so on, which I talked about in the previous lesson. So let's take a look at the properties for a product. As you can see, there are various different properties you can use to define the information in your web pages. Now, there's a lot here, scores of different properties, several dozen different things, but again, we don't really care about them all. We only care about the ones the search engines care about. Here, for instance, is Google's information about the product tags. Google explains exactly which properties it reads. So, there's the properties, but you have to get the properties into your pages, and there are several ways to do that. First, there's the microdata format, the system we looked at in the previous lesson. Here's an example, again from the Google product page. And this one is the JSON-LD method, which is actually Google's preferred method for some things. I'll get to that in a moment. This method embeds a block of JavaScript into the web page, instead of putting the property names into HTML tags. It's separate from the HTML and the visible text, which has some advantages. And this one is the RDFA format, another system that adds attributes to your HTML tag. So which method should you use? Well, Google prefers JSON-LD, however it doesn't support JSON-LD for everything right now. It supports it for the knowledge graph and site links, which we'll look at in a later lesson, and for events and probably breadcrumbs. Its documentation is contradictory on breadcrumbs right now. But for nothing else, not for products, recipes, and so on. As for Bing, it currently doesn't use JSON-LD, but accepts microdata, RDFA, and something called microformat. You'll notice that Bing also works with Facebook's Open Graph tagging, which is a way to tag a page in order to pass information to Facebook when the page is being pulled into Facebook posts. But that's an advanced subject I won't go into here. So which do you use? Well, for the knowledge graph and site links, you should probably use JSON-LD. These are Google elements anyway, so Bing isn't going to care either way. Both search engines work with events and breadcrumbs, so you might consider using both microdata and JSON-LD for these things, though Google will probably still read the microdata if you choose not to use JSON. And for everything else, you should use microdata, for now at least. What about the microformat coding method that Bing says it uses? Well, Google has in the past said it reads it, but at present it doesn't mention it in the documentation, so I wouldn't use it.
Coding structured data markup is an advanced subject with many combinations that I'm not going to describe in detail. There's plenty of specific information on the pages for which I've provided URLs. You'll find all the detail you need there when you're ready to code your pages. There are, however, a few tools that can assist you, which we'll look at in the next lesson. There are a few tools you can use to help you with both creating and testing your markup.
For example, this is a simple free editor that allows you to select a type, person, product, event, organization, movie, book, or review, enter the information, and then get microdata formatted markup. While you type in your data, the editor creates the basic HTML code for you and adds the microdata properties. Over on the right, you can see both what the entered text will look like, before you add your own formatting, of course, and a box containing the code. You can then copy this code into your web pages. There are various other markup tools available for various purposes. The company that created this tool, Raven, also provides a free WordPress plugin for creating markup directly within WordPress. Google provides a more sophisticated tool you might play with. You begin by selecting the type of data you need, and then you can either drop the HTML into a box or simply enter a URL and Google will retrieve it for you. You then simply highlight the fields on the page, the name of the product, the price, the description, the image, and so on, and each time a menu pops up from which you'll select the data type. Then click the Create HTML button, and Google provides you with the code. Google also provides a test tool. You can paste your code into the tool, or again, enter a URL, and Google will go retrieve the HTML. Click Validate, and Google provides you with a quick report telling you what's working and what isn't. These two Google systems are also available from within your Google Webmaster account, which you'll see in a later lesson in the Other Resources section of the Webmaster account. The Webmaster account also has a structured data dashboard, which you can find in the Search Appearance menu. This tool shows you what Google has learned about your site based on the structured data you have in the site.
So there is help for you out there, and you can find more specialized tools too, such as data markup tools for Joomla and Drupal. Bing has a markup validator in its Webmaster account too. So spend a little time searching and you'll probably find what you need if these examples are not enough. Google provides several special uses for structured data markup, beyond merely creating rich snippets, the expanded search results snippets that contain, for instance, stars and product ratings. In this lesson, we'll take a quick look at how to use markup to submit information to the knowledge graph, how to add a search box to your search results, and how to replace the URL in your search results with a name and breadcrumbs.
The knowledge graph is a box containing information about something, a type of food, a musician, a location, a company, and so on. Well, Google provides a way to submit data to it via structured data markup about you or your company. You can't make Google create a knowledge graph for you using this method, but if you do already have a knowledge graph appearing for you or your business, you can tell Google where it can find your logo, contact numbers, and social profile links. Creating a knowledge graph box in the first place is a subject that I may post a lesson on sometime in the future. It's not a simple thing. As I explained in an earlier lesson, Google prefers that you use the JSON LD markup for the knowledge graph data, so you essentially place this code within script tags somewhere in your HTML. This example tells Google where to find your company logo. You can also submit a variety of different phone numbers, customer service, tech support, sales, reservations, and so on. Google currently accepts a dozen or so different types of numbers, which are formatted like this. As for the social profile links, they look like this, and you can provide data for about 10 different social networks, including MySpace, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and SoundCloud. Here's the code you would use. You can put multiple social networks into a single script. So, that's the knowledge graph. Now, what about putting a search box into your Google search results? You've probably seen this before, where a company has multiple links in the search results. These links are called site links, and you have a little control over them through the Google Webmaster account, which you'll learn about later in this course. If Google does display site links for you, it only does so when it's sure that the searcher is trying to find your site, such as when the searcher uses your company name. And how do you get Google to add that search box above the site links? Well, you do it using this process. First, set up the Google Custom Search Service, which you can find at this URL. This is a free service with $100 a year upgrade if you want it. You can use this system to create a search engine for your website in just a minute or two. Google will then provide you with a script to embed the search engine into a page on your site. You'll then enter this piece of markup into your home page, essentially turning on the search box above your site links. Simple. Finally, replacing your URL in the search results with your company name and a breadcrumb, like this. Now, usually this area would contain the URL of the page being linked to, but in this example it has the name of the website, The Guardian, followed by a breadcrumb showing the hierarchical position of the page within the site. Now, the breadcrumbs can be created in several different ways. Here's how it can be done using microdata. And now, adding the name of the site to the beginning of the breadcrumb. This can be done with a simple little bit of code like this.
I do have a confession to make. I faked the name at the beginning of the breadcrumb in the earlier example. The problem is it doesn't seem to be working right now. Even though Google is still saying it does function, I haven't seen it work for at least a couple of months. I'm assuming though this is temporary, and as adding the name code takes just a few seconds, you might want to still take the time.
Anyway, you can find the details on all these markup coding issues and others in Google's documentation here.
At some point, you're going to want to make sure the search engines know about your website. In this section of the course, I'm going to explain exactly how you're going to do that. You may have heard that you need to submit your site to the search engines, and there's some truth to that, mixed up with a lot of misinformation, the basis of one of the oldest SEO scams. You've probably seen spam emails offering to submit your site to 1,000 search engines, or seen submission services advertised in the search results or around the web. Well, most of that is nonsense. I'll explain what you really do need to do though, starting with getting links to your website, and I'll explain why. You'll also learn about the role and importance of XML sitemaps and what to do with them. By the time you've finished this section of the course, you're going to know everything you need in order to get the attention of the search engines. One way to let the search engines know about your website, at least in theory, is to submit a URL to them through their simple Submit Your URLs pages. Really, the only reason I want to mention these is because you may hear about them and you need to know they're not particularly helpful. It's also the basis of one of the oldest SEO scams, selling search engine submissions. And although this scam has mostly disappeared, you may still run into it.
Both Google and Bing have Submit Your URL pages, as do various other search engines. The principle is simple. Just type a URL into the box and press enter, and the URL is submitted to the search engine. However, this may not do you much good. This text from Google explains what's going on. Perhaps nothing much. Submitting through these forms is very unreliable. It might work, but there's a good chance it won't, especially if your site doesn't have links pointing to it. What you really need in order to get your site indexed are links from other websites pointing to yours. You can also create an XML sitemap and both submit it to the search engines and provide a reference to the sitemap in your robots.txt file. These are subjects we'll look at next.
The way to get your site indexed is by getting links pointing to the site. The search engine search bots, as they move around the web, follow links from page to page. They also return to re-indexed pages frequently. So if you have links on other websites pointing to your site, eventually the search engines will follow those links to your site.
It's a simple concept. If your site has no links pointing to it, the search engines naturally think it's not important. If nobody on the web thinks enough of your site to link to it, then how important can it possibly be? So even if you submit a URL to the search engines, something we looked at in the previous lesson, or even if you have an XML sitemap, which we'll look at next, that's not enough. You must have links. Linking is a big subject, something I go into detail about later in this course. But at this stage, all you need to know is that you must get a handful of links from other sites pointing to yours. So where can you get links? First, do you have any existing websites, blogs, social networking accounts, or any other kind of web pages where you can place links to your site? Next, there's what I call friends and family links. Who do you know who can place a link on their website, in their blog, in their social networking pages, and so on? Ask everyone you can think of. You might also announce your site in whatever online forums or discussion groups you're a member of, and place a link to the site.
If this isn't enough to get you a few links, and you do need a few, not just one, then refer to the linking sections later in this course. So at this point, you might want to take a few minutes and think about this. Perhaps go place some links now, or ask friends, family, or colleagues to link to you. Or perhaps at this stage, just jot down a list of places you think you can probably obtain links. Although links pointing to your site help the search engines find your site, and links within the site help the search engines find their way around your site to all the various pages, there's something else you can do to help the search engines index your site. You can provide an XML sitemap.
Here's an example, Udemy's XML sitemap. The sitemap is not intended to be viewed by site visitors. It's purely intended for the search bots to find. It provides information about all the web pages on the site. There are a few different things you can do with sitemaps, and in fact there are sitemaps with different types of content. This sitemap's from CNN, for instance, and it's actually an index of other sitemap files. CNN is a very large site, of course, so it's broken its sitemaps down into separate units. So here is one of the sitemap files that actually provides information about particular web pages on the site. And here's a sitemap file that provides information about videos on the CNN website. So how do you create an XML sitemap? Well, the first thing you should do is check whether the web creation system you're using provides a built-in XML sitemap tool. Or perhaps there are plugins or extensions that can be added to your system. If you're using WordPress to create your site, you can use one of the several systems to automatically create the sitemap for you. And other content management systems such as Joomla and Drupal also have add-on software for building sitemaps. XML sitemaps are common these days and well known, so many systems do provide some kind of sitemap tool. However, if your system doesn't, you can still find various tools you can use. XML-sitemaps.com, for instance, provides a simple way to create a small sitemap for free, up to 500 pages. You just enter the URL of your home page, and the system crawls your website, gathering information, then creates a sitemap that you can download. For larger sites, this company also sells software that can be installed on your web server and set up to automatically update your sitemap each day. There are lots of options though. Just search for the phrase sitemap generator and you'll find plenty of choices. So this XML sitemap is going to be placed into your website, usually in the root directory, the top level folder, though it doesn't have to be there. As can be seen in the case of the CNN sitemaps, CNN has chosen to place their sitemaps into a sitemap folder. It also doesn't have to be named sitemaps.xml, though it usually is. In CNN's case, it has several different sitemaps with different names. Next, you have to let the search engines know where your sitemap is stored. You'll do that two ways: by adding a reference to the robots.txt file, which we'll look at next. After that, we'll look at how to submit your sitemap to the search engines using the Webmaster Consoles. Both Bing and Google have Webmaster Consoles where you can do this. There's no need to worry about Yahoo, as Yahoo's getting results from Bing, so it doesn't have a Webmaster Console any longer. If your needs are more complicated than what I've covered in this lesson, you can learn more about sitemaps here. So at this point, you might want to spend a few minutes figuring this out, determining whether your development tool provides a way to create a sitemap or what your other options may be. Sitemaps are really quite important. Every site should have one.
You've learned how to create your sitemap. You now need to upload the sitemap to your website and tell the search engines where it is. In this lesson, we'll quickly look at how to provide a reference to the sitemap in your robots.txt file. We'll also look at the idea of pinging the search engines with the sitemap information.
You're going to add a reference to the robots.txt file that sits in your website's root directory. This is the simple text file that we saw in an earlier lesson. You're going to add this line somewhere inside this file, changing the information to the appropriate references, of course, pointing to wherever the file is saved. Although the sitemap is usually stored in the site's root directory and is usually called sitemap.xml, you can actually put it wherever you want it and call it whatever you want. Here's CNN's robots.txt file, for instance, showing its various sitemap references. Most sites just need a single sitemap, but of course CNN.com is so large their needs are more than average. With this reference, search engines that don't provide a way to submit sitemaps directly to them can still figure out where the sitemap is. For instance, Ask.com recommends that users provide this reference in robots.txt so that it can find the sitemap. It's also possible to ping some search engines, to send a message directly to the search engines to inform them that your sitemap has changed. You can actually see that in action using these URLs. You add the full URL of your sitemap after sitemap equals. Include the HTTP piece at the beginning. Then place it into a browser's location bar and press enter. As you can see here, when you submit your sitemap, the search engine responds. Does this do much? Perhaps not. Some XML sitemap utilities actually have automatic pinging built in. However, pinging is definitely not a substitution for submitting your sitemap to the search engines through the Webmaster Console, which we'll cover next.
Before we do that, though, you may want to take a moment or two to make sure your sitemap is properly referenced inside your robots.txt file. In this lesson, I'm going to explain the best way to submit your XML sitemap to the search engines through the search engines' webmaster accounts. These are systems that allow site owners and people who manage sites to submit information to the search engines, but also to get information about their sites and how the sites are viewed by the search engines in return.
Several search engines have webmaster accounts. Most people taking this course are going to be interested in Google and Bing webmaster accounts. Yahoo, of course, no longer has a webmaster system, as Yahoo gets its search results from Bing, as you've heard earlier. So for most of you, the only systems you need to care about are the Google and Bing systems. However, there are others. If you need to be listed in Yandex, you'll want to get to know that search engine's webmaster account. Yandex is one of the world's largest search engines, but is mostly used in Russia, where it has perhaps 60% of the search market, along with Belarus, Ukraine, Kazakhstan, and Turkey. Yandex's Webmaster Console can be accessed in English if you want to check it out. Also, there's Baidu, the world's second largest search engine after Google, which serves the Chinese market. It's only available in Chinese, but if you need to be listed, then that's probably not a problem for you. You can also search through Google for translations of the webmaster interface, if it is. I believe you may need a Chinese phone number, but as I don't actually speak Chinese, I'm not exactly sure. You can find the various webmaster accounts on these URLs.
Now, I'm going to be talking about the Google Webmaster account in detail in the upcoming Webmasters section of this course, and won't be going into detail about the other systems. But the sitemap submission process is pretty straightforward in all the systems. Here's the basic procedure for submitting an XML sitemap through all these systems using Bing as an example. You begin by creating an account, of course, if you don't already have one for that search engine. If you do, go to the appropriate URL and log in.
You'll then register or add your site to the system. Webmaster accounts allow you to submit information about multiple sites. You don't need a separate account for each one. Although, having said that, sometimes webmasters playing various SEO games prefer that the search engines are not aware of the common ownership of sites. So, you'll provide the URL of your site and also the URL of the sitemap. Generally, the sitemap is called sitemap.xml and is stored in the root of your website, but you can actually call it anything and place it anywhere. Once you've submitted that information, the search engine provides a way for you to verify your site, to confirm, in effect, that you own or manage the website. There are several ways to do this, the simplest being that you're given a small HTML or XML file containing a unique code that you place in the root of your website. Alternatively, you can put a special meta tag in your home page containing a unique code, or perhaps create a CNAME alias in your domain's DNS record. Either way, once you've made the changes, you can then ask the system to verify that you have indeed made the changes, at which point you have successfully validated your site, and the search engine knows that you have authorization to see certain information about the site. At that point, you've submitted your sitemap, and you now have access to all the various tools and reports provided by the Webmaster Console. And that's really about it. Submitting a sitemap to the search engines is quick and easy, something you can do in a few minutes with both Google and Bing.
Later in the course, we'll look in more detail at the sort of things you can do and learn in the Webmaster accounts. We'll be using the Google Search Console as the example. Bing is similar, but most people will want to start with Google anyway. But at this point, you might want to go to register your site and submit your XML sitemap if it's ready. As I said, it only takes a few minutes. You can come back and learn more about the Google Search Console later. Bing and Google actually provide another mechanism for submitting your site beyond the XML sitemap submission we've looked at. Within the Webmaster consoles, both systems provide a way for you to tell them about particular URLs. You might want to use these things as a way to make sure the search engines are paying attention to you, to speed up the initial indexing of a new site, or to make sure they grab a new page you've added that you want to see indexed quickly.
I described the Google Webmaster account, Google Search Console, in detail later in this course. For the purposes of this lesson, I'll just assume that you've created an account in these systems, and I'll show you exactly where the mechanisms can be found within the Webmaster accounts. Let's start with Google. You'll want to select the Crawl menu and then the Fetch as Google option. I'll describe this feature in more detail later in the course, but for now your task is simple. Just enter the URL you want indexed and click the Fetch button. Google will go fetch the page, which may take a moment or two. You can then click the Submit to Index button to see this dialog box. Now you have two choices. You can choose to submit just this page, and as you can see, you can submit 500 individual pages every month. Or you can choose to have Google index this page, but also crawl the pages that are directly linked to from this page. However, you can only do this 10 times a month. You might want to submit a page such as an HTML sitemap page or a page with extensive navigation, and use this method to have Google follow through the links to grab more pages. Make your choice, then click the Go button, and you're done. Now, let's look at Bing. Inside the Bing Webmaster Console, open the Configure My Site menu and select the Submit URLs option. In this screen, enter one or more URLs in this text box. As you can see, Google allows you to submit up to 50 URLs each month, though with a maximum of 10 a day. So you may want to be strategic and submit important pages with good links around the site first. Just click the Submit button, and that's it. You've finished.
There are search engines and there are search directories, and in this section of the course you're going to learn the difference between the two and how search directories can help your site in the search engine's results pages. I'll explain why the big search directories have mostly disappeared over recent years and how to submit to perhaps the most important survivor. But I'll also be explaining why you need to find more directories to submit your website to and how to find them. And you'll also learn a few things to help you make the decision you'll be faced with in some of these directories. Should you pay or not? In this section of the course, I'm going to be talking about directories and how they can help you in your SEO strategy in several ways. But first, I need to explain what I mean by a search directory. What exactly is the difference between a search engine and a search directory?
In the earliest days of the World Wide Web, back in 1992, and even into the middle of 1993, there were no search engines. There were simply lists of links to other websites. While the web was small, just a few hundred websites in the middle of 1992, there was little need for anything more advanced than this. But as the web grew, in particular exponentially in the summer of 1994, These lists grew into directories, which are essentially big, categorized lists of websites. It's hard to imagine, but back in those days, people were actually buying paper directories of the web, and these directories soon found themselves online. For instance, O'Reilly & Associates took a book that it published in 1992, The Whole Internet User's Guide and Catalog, and put it online in the summer of 1993 and called it the Global Network Navigator. Then, in 1994, came Yahoo, and Yahoo became the world's most popular search site. If you wanted to find information on the web, you would probably go to Yahoo to begin. But it wasn't a search engine, it was a search directory. There are several important differences between search engines and search directories. Firstly, data collection. A directory contains human-submitted or human-collected data, either submitted to the directory by the site owner or collected by someone working for the directory. On the other hand, a search engine uses programs, search bots, to collect the data. Working like a web browser, the search bots request pages from websites, read them, then request other pages, linked to from those first pages. Thus, they, in effect, crawl through the web, gathering pages. Next, what is being indexed? The search directory's index contains information about websites. The directory typically contains a site name, a URL pointing to the home page of the website, and a short description of what's in the site. On the other hand, a search index really indexes web pages rather than websites. The goal of the search index is to help people find specific web pages, while the directory helps people find specific websites. Also, there's the user interface issue. A directory allows someone to either search for a site or to browse through the directory, working their way through categories and subcategories. Search engines, though, merely let you search for specific pages. So, while Yahoo was for a while the Google of the day, the most important search site on the web, eventually the limitations of directories became obvious. They only hold a small amount of data, merely a short description of each site, rather than a detailed index of all, or at least many, of the pages within the site. Over the years, the directories fell into disuse and, in fact, in many cases have disappeared. Yahoo, for instance, although it mostly provided search engine results, also kept the search directory running all the way up until the end of 2014. Almost nobody knew it was there, though, and so a little over 20 years after it started, the directory closed down. Google also had a search directory all the way up to the middle of 2011. Google's data came from a directory called DMOZ, or the Open Directory Project. This is owned by AOL and volunteer-run. The site provided its data to many different sites, not only Google, but AOL, Netscape, Lycos, and so on. But most sites that used DMOZ directory data in the past have stopped doing so, and the directory itself is hard to get into these days.
So the major directories are disappearing, but there are many smaller directories, and getting listed in directories can still be helpful, as I'll explain in the next lesson. How can getting listed in search directories help you? I think there are three essential ways that being listed helps. To begin with, some of these directories are actually searched now and then, in particular the more specialized directories. Some people may go straight to one of these directories rather than searching through a major search engine.
People looking for rabbit breeders, for instance, who are already plugged into the online rabbit lovers community, may go straight to a directory when looking for a rabbit breeder, rather than searching Google or Bing. So, if you are a rabbit breeder, being in these directories would be a really good thing. This isn't exactly SEO, you're not optimizing your site, but however people arrive at your site is a good thing, and of course one could argue this is still a form of search engine marketing. Next, sometimes a page from one of these directories may come up in the search results. Someone searches Google or Bing, for instance, sees a directory search result in the index, goes to that page, and clicks on your link. Finally, there's the whole linking issue. Later in this course, you're going to learn just how important links pointing to your website are. Links are essential. The more links, the better. I won't explain the details right now. All you need to know for the moment is that getting listed in search directories gets you links, and that's a very good thing. Many directories are indexed by the major search engines, so getting a listing can result in a really useful link pointing to your site. These entries, for instance, include links to the breeders' websites. In fact, directory links carry a little extra value in the sense that they provide a bit more context to the search engines. If you get a link from a directory of rabbit breeders, the search engines have another clue that your site is related to breeding rabbits. So that's a good thing. dmoz.org, the Open Directory project, used to be a great place to get a link. dmoz data was distributed to so many different sites that a listing in the directory could provide you with literally hundreds of useful links. These days there are two problems. Firstly, very few sites now use the dmoz data, and getting into dmoz can often be quite difficult because it seems that most dmoz category editors have left. It's grossly understaffed and probably in a precipitous decline. However, the advantages are that the directory is still indexed by Google, more than 2.5 million pages, and Bing also indexes dmoz, but only around 1/10 of the number of pages. But the other thing is, it only takes a few minutes to submit a listing to dmoz. So my theory is, you try, maybe you get in and maybe you don't. Just try it and forget about it. Think of it as a free lottery ticket. So, how do you submit? Go to dmoz.org and drill down through the categories until you find the one in which you want to be listed. You might want to scroll to the bottom of the page and see if these volunteer to edit this category and become an editor boxes are visible. If not, an editor has probably been assigned, though it doesn't mean the editor is very active. But if you see these on the page, your chance of getting listed has dropped dramatically because there's no editor to review it. Of course, you might consider becoming an editor in order to push your listing through, or you could pick another category that does have an editor. When you find the category you want to try, click the Suggest URL link at the top. I suggest you read the instructions carefully. If you submit the information in the wrong format, you'll simply never get listed. Submitting is easy though. Just enter the URL of your site, the name of your site, and 25 to 30 words describing your site. Then enter your email address, the user verification captcha text, click Submit, and you're done.
I'd recommend that you now forget about it. You've just purchased a dmoz lottery ticket, and even if you win, it could take months or even years to do so. And don't bother resubmitting your site. Each time you do that, you go to the back of the line. dmoz links are nice if you can get them, but you probably can't, so don't worry about it. Just submit and move on. You might want to spend a few minutes right now submitting to dmoz and then come back to the next lesson. What other directories should you be listed in? I think there are several categories of directories to consider, at least one of which you should definitely get listed in, while the other two perhaps not.
You should definitely be looking for specialty directories to list in, directories that are directly related to your particular business. Or, if yours is a local business, a business serving a particular city or region, you should be looking for regional directories, although that's a subject I'm going to leave for the section on local search listings. Then there are the large, respectable general directories. You may want a listing in some of these, though as there's often a price to be paid, you may not. Finally, there are the many thousands of garbage directories, which are probably not worth your time. Let's look at these one by one. In an earlier lesson, I showed you a rabbit breeders directory. If you're a rabbit breeder, then you definitely want to be in this directory. Links from specialty directories like this can be very valuable. They can bring visitors directly from the directory itself, and they can help your SEO efforts. How do you find these? Simply search a major search engine for your business type, along with the keywords directory, list, and listing. You may be surprised at how many possible places to get listed you find. Some of these may be simple lists rather than formal directories, perhaps maintained on hobbyists' blogs. That's fine. Everything helps. When you find an appropriate directory, look for some way to add your site. You may find a button or link, or may need to email the owner. in particular in the case of a simple list in a blog. You might need to search the page for the word add or submit, and you'll often find the links in the header or the footer. Or perhaps you can find a Contact Us link. In some cases, you'll only be able to get a listing if you pay. That's an issue I'll address in the following lesson. Next, the reputable general directories. There are a few of these, though not as many as there used to be. We've already seen dmoz.org in an earlier lesson, but there are others, such as bestoftheweb.org and joant.com. You can actually find lists of search directories, but many of these lists are old, and many of the directories are now out of business. Is it worth getting into these directories? If you can get a free listing, I'd say yes. If you have to pay, well, maybe, but see the next lesson. Some of these directories are indexed by Google. Joant currently has only 20,000 odd pages indexed by Google, and Best of the Web has around 300,000, with much lower numbers indexed by Bing.
I would put these kind of directories at the bottom of my to-do list. You aren't likely to get much traffic from the search directories themselves, and there's a good chance the listing pages won't be found in the major search engines. So perhaps it's something you do later if you still need more links to push your site up in the results.
Finally, the garbage directories. There are thousands of small, little-known directories, and you can find services that will submit your site to them very cheaply, a few cents per directory. I've used these services in years past and found that only a portion of the submissions actually end up as listings. Submit to 1,000 directories and perhaps you'll end up with 200 or 300 links to your site. Still, if you can submit to 2,000 directories for a couple of $100 and end up with 200 or 300 links, that sounds pretty good.
However, these days, this kind of garbage directory link has very little value, if any at all. The search engine designers aren't dumb. They know these directories have no value, that nobody really uses them, and so the search engines have greatly devalued these links and even dropped the directories from their indexes. So today, I wouldn't bother with this strategy. Some directories require payment to get listed. Some provide a free basic listing, but you have to pay to include a link. And some actually allow you to put a link in your basic listing, but charge for a more prominent listing. Should you hand over your hard-earned cash in order to get into these directories? Well, I have two answers, maybe and sometimes.
There's no real easy answer to this question. It depends on a few things: the price, how cash-strapped your business is, how much traffic you're likely to get from the link, and how much of an SEO effect you're likely to get. Of course, I'm assuming here that the directory will give you a link to your site if you pay. You may run into some directories that only provide email addresses and phone numbers, though that's rare these days. Firstly, how poor are you? If every penny counts right now, then I'd advise that you don't pay for directory placements, at least not initially. You might keep a list of the directories that want payment in a spreadsheet. Keep the name of the directory, the URL, and the cost. You can always come back later and buy a few more directory links when you're in a better financial position. If, on the other hand, money is pretty much no object, if your SEO budget is generous, it'll be easier to just plonk down a few bucks here and there. On the other hand, if you can get a link to your site in a basic listing, then in many cases there's no real advantage to paying for an upgraded listing. If you feel that the directory is busy and likely to send traffic your way regardless of the SEO effects, then sure, it may be worth spending a little cash. Think of it as an advertising charge. But with advertising, there are two things you want to know. Firstly, how much your ad is likely to be seen. That's hard to know up front, but you can do a couple of things to assess how busy the site is. Perhaps you just know the site is busy. If you're familiar with the web landscape of your industry, then you quite likely know which sites are popular. You might also check the site in alexa.com. This gives you an idea of the relative amount of traffic going to the site. There are also tools such as compete.com and quantcast.com that can help you assess how much traffic a particular site is getting. Secondly, as with any form of advertising, you need to measure results, so you should be tracking traffic coming into your site and where it comes from, so you'll be able to see how much traffic comes from that directory. When it comes time to renew, you'll know whether it's worth it, at least from the direct traffic standpoint. I won't be covering traffic analysis in this course, but any basic web analysis package can show you this sort of thing, and any decent web developer should be able to set it up for you. Now, what about SEO effects? They're pretty much impossible to measure, but you do want to be aware of several things. First, is the site indexed by the major search engines? Remember, you can use the site : syntax to find out how many pages in a directory are indexed. If it's not indexed, or the page your listing is going to be on isn't indexed, then you won't get any SEO benefit. Next, is it a follow or no follow link? You should look at the existing directory links to see. This is a subject we'll cover in detail in the section on linking later in the course. And what's the page rank of the site? Or better still, the page on which your link will sit. What's the page rank of that page? This is another subject we'll be looking at later in this course. The higher the page rank or equivalent, the more SEO effect you're likely to get. Later in this course, you'll learn about link analysis. Some link analysis tools, such as Majestic SEO and Moz, do provide some kind of measure of value of the pages on which links are placed. The higher the value, the more likely the link is to help you in the search engines. Finally, will you have useful keywords in the links, in the anchor text? Another linking subject we'll be discussing later. Often directories link using your site or company name, and that's okay, but it's always nice to get keywords in the links.
So these are all things to consider when it comes to paying. As I said earlier, you may want to pay sometimes. In this section of the course, I'm going to look in detail at webmaster accounts using the Google Search Console, Google's webmaster account, as an example. The world's major search engines, Google, Bing, Baidu, and Yandex, all provide mechanisms through which webmasters can submit information about their sites and also receive information back from the search engines. But I'm not going to look at all these systems, as they all provide similar sorts of mechanisms. Rather, I'm going to use Google as the example, because of course Google has both the world's most important and feature-rich webmaster console. As you learned earlier in the section on site submissions, the best way to provide information to the search engines about your website is to submit the XML sitemap, and you'll do that through the webmaster console. As you'll learn in this section though, you can also receive all sorts of useful and interesting information about how the search engines view your site.